Good morning, everyone. My name is Judge Sheila Woods Skipper, and I am the Administrative Judge for the Orphans Court in Philadelphia. I'm also a member of the Advisory Council on Elder Justice, and I'd like to welcome you to our first virtual education town hall, sponsored by the Advisory Council on Elder Justice. The Advisory Council on Elder Justice resulted from a task force convened by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, led by Justice Deborah Tide, to evaluate issues surrounding elder abuse and to come up with solutions to address these concerns. This task force resulted in 130 recommendations, which the Advisory Council is working diligently to implement with the assistance of the Office of Elder Justice, both created as a result of the work of the task force. This town hall was specifically designed to coincide with World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which was officially recognized yesterday on June 15th, but whose issues are concerning and are raised every day. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was created by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health Organization at the United Nations in 2006 to raise awareness of elder abuse and to promote policies, services, and programs to prevent it. Elder abuse is really a real crisis here that has significant impact on all Pennsylvanians and all around the world. According to the National Center on Elder Abuse, each year, 1 in 10 older Americans are victims of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Oftentimes, these instances go unreported. Research shows that as few as 1 in 14 cases are brought to the attention of the authorities. We hope that this seminar will help to educate you, the public, about recognizing the signs of elder abuse, understanding the resources and remedies available, and learning to be your own best advocate. I will be joined today by an esteemed panel of experts who will provide valuable information and insight on how to navigate these issues. We will also hear from 2 victims who have been impacted and who have suffered the consequences of elder abuse and their experiences. After hearing each victim's story, the panelists will discuss issues raised and solutions. So let me briefly introduce the panel that will join me today. First, we have Leah Finlesson, who currently serves as the Director of Victim Services at Senior Law Center. She leads a victim services team focused on direct representation and advocacy addressing elder abuse and financial exploitation. Prior to joining Senior Law in 2016, she was a managing attorney of the Bethlehem office of North Penn Legal Services, a legal aid office representing clients in Lehigh and Northampton County in Pennsylvania. She joined North Penn in 2001 and represented and advised low-income clients in various areas of law, including family law, landlord-tenant, mortgage foreclosure, consumer defense and bankruptcy, unemployment, welfare, and adult and minor guardianships. Next, we're joined by Denise Getchen, who has worked for over 29 years in various registered nursing roles in intensive care units and corrections. She has worked for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania since 2000 for both the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Aging. Denise assumed her role as Director of Protective Services Office in 2015. The office is responsible for the administration and implementation of the statewide Older Adults Protective Services Program. This program receives reports of suspected cases of elder abuse, investigates the case to determine if it can be substantiated, and if it is, initiates a care plan to remove the older adult from the abuse to ensure their health and safety. Next, we'll be joined by Mark Levenberg, who is a Senior Deputy Attorney General with the Medicaid Fraud Control Section of the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General, where he has overseen the care-dependent neglect team since 2019. Prior to that, Mr. Levenberg spent 19 years as an Assistant District Attorney in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, where he spent most of his time trying cases in the Homicide, Special Investigations, and Major Trials Unit. We will also hear the victim stories of Gerald Sullivan from Philadelphia County and Peggy Oliverio from Washington County, who will recount and share their experiences. As we conclude this town hall, a participant survey will pop up on your screen. Please complete the survey as it will assist us in planning future town halls and educational events. So, without further ado, let's turn to the video of the story of the first victim, Gerald Sullivan.
Well, it began when I met Desiree. It was just one of those days when I just was feeling, like I wanted to get to know somebody, meet somebody. And I went to a chat room and she suggested that we meet. So I went to meet her and, she was like a nice person, seemed to be a nice person, pleasant, bubbly, younger. And I guess it sort of stroked my ego a little bit that this young girl was paying attention to an old guy like me. We saw each other a few times, and then she disappeared without a word. I had no idea what happened to her. I guess about a year later, she popped up again, sent me a text message, asked me if I wanted to get together again. And we did. Then one day I get a message saying that she had been kicked out of where she was living, and some people put a beat down on her. She had to go to the hospital. She assured me that it would only take her a day or two to find other arrangements, but she didn't. And when I went back to work, I said, okay, just see if you can find something. And I think she just stopped looking. She just figured, this is home for me. This is where I want to be, and this is where I'm going to be. It was a couple months later that I found her unconscious on the living room floor with a syringe next to her. And that's when I realized that she was a drug addict. And I really was interested in helping her. But while she was living with me, I also noticed, at least on 4 occasions, that I was missing money out of my wallet. 3 times a $20 bill and 1 time a $50 bill. And I asked her about it. She said, well, I didn't take it. There were also 2 other occasions when I gave her money to go to the grocery store to buy groceries, $40 both times. And both times she said she lost the money. I did have to call the police on her one time. And when they came, I said, look, I don't know what else to do. She's out of control. She's on drugs. And the police said, well, you can't just kick her out. You allowed her to stay here. You have to get her evicted. So I didn't know what that process involved, but I figured it was going to involve money that I didn't have. So that's when I started. I had to get the ball rolling on getting her evicted. That's when she started becoming physically violent, throwing things, punching holes in the wall, knocking things over. And one day she was just particularly violent, and I really feared for my safety. I called the police again. Well, the police once again told me that I had to go down, file for a PFA against her. That night, she was banging stuff into the walls, throwing stuff around. I was just in the bedroom with the door shut, not locked, shut. But all of a sudden, she started banging on the door, came in, knocked my TV down, and she had a look in her face that I swear to God, it was a look of murder. And that's what I really feared for my safety. I really thought that she was going to freak out to the point where she was going to kill me. About a week later, she was arrested for selling drugs. She did a year up at Eagleville. And during that time, I did get the PFA finalized. I got her evicted. And I said, well, I'm sure as soon as she gets out of prison, she's going to come right here, which is what she did. She got an early release because of COVID. And she came right here, was knocking on the door. I could hear her in the hallway. I didn't speak to her. I did not engage her in any way, shape, or form. I did call the police. And all I could hear her say was, why did you do that? And then she disappeared. And then 2 months ago, I got a letter from a collection agency saying how sorry they were and their deepest sympathies at my time of loss. So I went online. I found her death notice. She died in February. Didn't say how. And I felt a sense of relief, but, you know, I still haven't found closure. I'm a little bit wiser and a little bit more skeptical when I see that smiling face now. I mean, just the fact that, you know, now I'll think twice and even 3 times before I get together with somebody, and especially in matters of the heart, because there are people who'll think you're, you know, hey, this is a lonely guy. You know, I might be able to get something out of it, you know. But all I have to do is show him something, you know, give him something that he hasn't been getting, which is companionship. I always thought I was stronger than that. I always thought I had a good eye for somebody working a scam. But I since found out that this was a pattern with her, that I wasn't the first person she did this to. I mean, anybody can be a victim. You don't see it coming.
So now let's turn to our panelists, who will each provide some introductory remarks and responses to this video, and then engage in an interactive discussion. We will begin with Leah, followed by Denise, followed by Mark. So if you have any questions, please place them in the chat, and we will try to make sure they are answered before we conclude this program. Hopefully, there will be ample opportunity near the end of the program to respond to any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I'm very happy to be here today and join some great esteemed colleagues. So Mr. Sullivan actually was my client in a PFA, and I want to thank him for sharing his story. I want to echo something that he said in his video, which is scams and this kind of things can happen to anyone in any position. So that's something we're probably going to echo today. So his story is pretty common. We see this often with some of our clients. We have older men and younger women. Often our older seniors have veterans benefits or Social Security benefits, and they have more stable housing. And we often have things that is happening with Mr. Sullivan, which is a younger woman with drug issues or mental health issues and housing instability. And so that Mr. Sullivan becomes a pretty good target for this type of abuser. His story also combats some of the stereotypes that we see, which is men and women can be abusers, but men and women can also be abused. So as the judge had said, I'm the director of victim services. My staff is a 20-person victim service team. We represent in Philadelphia and the 4 surrounding counties, which are Bucks County, Chester County, Delaware County, and Montgomery County. And we're seeing all types of other abuse. We're seeing the physical abuse, we're seeing the emotional abuse and neglect. We're hearing stories about financial exploitation, the psychological abuse, and sexual abuse. So when a senior calls the Senior Law Center and say they're being abused, one of the first things we look at is whether or not the senior can file a protection from abuse order, which is commonly referred to as a restraining order, see if they can get some immediate relief. Because one of the good things about a protection order is if you're entitled to a temporary protection order, you can get your abuser immediately evicted and excluded from your property. You could prohibit them from having any contact with you, and they have to stop abusing you immediately. So when the sheriff comes and serves the protection order against the abuser, they have to get out of your home. So that is something that we look for in cases when seniors are calling in saying they're being abused. The problem, unfortunately, is there are limitations in Pennsylvania about who can file. So in Pennsylvania, to file for a PFA, you have to be related in some way. So you have to be related by family, by blood, or marriage, or you have to be a current or former intimate partner, right? So it's limited in the relationship. There has to be some sort of intimate relationship there. The other issue with PFAs is, unfortunately, it doesn't protect against emotional abuse, it doesn't protect against financial exploitation, and it doesn't protect against neglect. So it has to be some sort of threat of violence, some physical violence, some stalking, or sexual abuse. So in Mr. Sullivan's story, right, so he didn't say that the defendant had pushed him or hit him. However, she threw things at him. So throwing things at somebody, throwing things near somebody, getting in someone's face, they're all harassing or abusive behaviors that do warrant getting a protection. So how does someone file for a protection order if they're being abused? So in Philadelphia, right now, all the procedures are virtual. So if a senior needs to file, you would contact the domestic violence unit of family court, and you would talk to an interviewer. So right now, because everything is virtual, you need to have an email address. So if a senior doesn't have an email address, we also help a senior file. Either we help them file or we file the petition for them and we represent them in court. If you're filing outside of Philadelphia, they are in person. So you have to go to the local courthouse, and each county is a little bit different. So it's really important to contact your local domestic violence agency, your local AAA agency to see what the requirements are, or call the court directly to say, what time can I file? There are also procedures in place if someone needs to file an emergency petition outside of the normal hours. So in Philadelphia, there's the Criminal Justice Center where you would file, and in counties outside of Philadelphia, you call your local police and you ask who is the local magistrate who is hearing PFA cases. So again, if you're being physically abused, trying to file for a PFA is the best way to try to get immediate relief from your abuser.
So Leah, we're going to delve in a little deeper very shortly, but let's move on and see what Denise's response is, and then we'll come back for more conversation.
Absolutely.
I think you're on mute, Denise.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Great.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Your Honor. In Pennsylvania, we have the Older Adults Protective Service Act. This law really acts to serve older adults who are age 60 and above. We at the Department of Aging, we work through the local area agencies on aging who are responsible to take allegations of abuse, investigate them, and then also put in services to decrease or eliminate the abuse that they find through their investigation. So in Pennsylvania, we do have lifetime protection. So we have child protective services, we have adult protective services, and then we also have older adult protective services. In this case, I think that should the area agency on aging have been called, we would have immediately gone out to start an investigation. We would act to ensure the immediate safety of Mr. Sullivan. And from there, we would work with him to develop a service plan or a care plan, if you will, to make sure that his assets were protected and that he was free from the physical abuse and the emotional abuse it sounds like he experienced. So again, the Area Agency on Aging can be contacted 24/7. We have a hotline number that's accessible to anyone who wants to report abuse. That number is 1-800-490-8505. They can call the Area Agency on Aging, and by law, we are required to do an investigation if we find that the allegations were substantiated or the older adult is in need of protective services. Then we can put in services. In Mr. Sullivan's case, we may have made a referral back to, as Leah said, senior law or legal services. We may have offered him counseling. We may refer him to a victim service provider, but our first and primary goal is to ensure his safety. So that just gives you a sort of an overview of protective services in Pennsylvania. And I think I can pass that on to Mark.
All right, thank you, Denise. Mark, please.
Yeah, hi. So as the judge said, my name is Mark Levenberg, and I'm with the Attorney General's office, and we look at this from a few different perspectives, but primarily I deal with the criminal enforcement, and so we operate similar to a local district attorney, and we have overlapping areas of responsibility in a number of areas that include neglect and abuse, identity theft, Medicaid fraud, insurance fraud, that type of conduct. And then in other areas, the local district attorney would fill a similar role to what we do. So let's talk a little bit about the law enforcement response to an event like this. I mean, the first question that someone like Jerry would face is, who do you call for help? And you saw in his story that he actually, refers to sort of a few different, mechanisms, but the first and most obvious, of course, is call the police. And in any kind of emergency where somebody's in immediate danger, you should call 911 because that can get you police protection or the medical services that somebody needs. But that's not the only answer because these cases are complicated. And you saw, particularly in Jerry's situation, where initially maybe he didn't really want sort of criminal involvement, but he knew something was wrong. And in that situation, again, as Denise just mentioned, the Department of Aging or the local area agency on aging is another resource, another sort of first responder that can come in and try to help the situation. Another option, of course, like we talked about, was seeking a PFA order. And again, these incidents can be reported to the Office of the Attorney General or the local district attorney's office to investigate the criminal aspects. But again, in an emergency situation, you want to call those other agencies that can get there and help right away, and then later report to the Office of the Attorney General or the local district attorney for the criminal aspects, and we would then conduct an investigation, decide if charges are appropriate. In Gary's case, there's a number of potential criminal charges like theft or harassment or stalking when somebody with the intent to harass, annoy, or alarm someone, either shoves them, kicks them, pushes them, or threatens them with physical contact, or communicates with them repeatedly or at, inconvenient hours or follows them around in public. And if that's done with the intent to cause emotional distress, it rises to the level of stalking. Maybe one of the most important things that was mentioned is a protection from abuse order. Now, when Jerry described how the offender came back around after that protection from abuse order was in place, Jerry did the right thing. That is, he called the police. He didn't engage with her. And that's because once that order is in place, they don't have to do anything. Just being around you is a violation of the order. You can call the police and the police will come and remove them from the situation. And there may be criminal charges that follow from that. But again, once that judge puts that order in place, you can't sort of just say, well, it was okay this time. Once the order's there, only the judge can remove it. And so that's a good protective mechanism. And again, if in Jerry's situation, the offender had been a caretaker, then that may also be abuse of a care-dependent person. Now, it doesn't sound like in Jerry's situation that was the case, but that's another potential criminal charge. So in Jerry's situation, of course, the offender passed away, and so there wouldn't be any criminal charges after that. But it's important because in the situation where an offender passes away, you can still get those victim services, the counseling and other aspects. And that really, brings me, I think the big takeaway from Jerry's story is don't blame yourself. Everybody, no matter how mighty or low, to get in a situation where they are taken advantage by a con artist or their trust is abused, and reporting it is a really good thing because it can be therapeutic in the sense that you find out that other people are also victimized in these same ways. And even though initially we feel embarrassed and we don't want to report something, really there are a lot of resources out there that become activated when you report this, and you can then find out that you're, part of a larger community. So don't, remember to sort of step forward and speak up. And I think that really was a big takeaway from Jerry's story.
All right, thank you, Mark. So I'm going to ask all panelists to unmute and just sort of engage in conversation about what you have heard each of you say. One of the things that came up for me, and if I'm a layperson, all the information you have provided sounds very complicated. How do I really involve myself in this process? Do I need a lawyer? How long does any of this take? And do I have to wait until I am actually physically abused to access any of these processes? So I'll turn it over to whoever wants to respond.
Hi, this is Denise. I'd be glad to respond. In protective services, it actually is really very easy to report. All you have to do is to call your local area agency on aging or our statewide abuse reporting hotline that I mentioned earlier, and share your concerns or the allegation of abuse. From there, the area agency on aging would contact the alleged victim or the reporter. If they're the same person, we often do a face-to-face visit so we can sit down and talk with the older adult to find out exactly what happened and to also really talk with them about what they want to occur as a result of this incident or incidents that they're going through. So one of the things I did want to talk about is consent. So for protective services, the older adult has to consent to the services, and they don't always want to engage, as Mark said, law enforcement. So there are other remedies that we can take. For instance, in Jerry's situation, it could be that since the allegation he had handled that and gotten a PFA, he may want counseling. So it could be as simple as education all the way up through and including guardianship in terms of what services protective service can put in. But it really is a very easy process to access.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to say anything or respond?
Yeah, I would just follow up on that. I agree wholeheartedly, and I would point out maybe the biggest distinction between the criminal enforcement and the other methods of enforcement, and that is that, criminal enforcement oftentimes looks back at an event that has already happened, and we decide, was that criminal, and our charge is appropriate, and then we take action. And while there are things we can do, like a stay-away order while the proceedings are going on and things like that, to help keep someone safe, a lot of the other services that are provided by my fellow panelists are preventative in nature, and that can be really important. And so, contacting, again, as Denise said, the Department of Aging or the Area Agency on Aging, engaging with the Senior Law Center to help get a protection from abuse order, those first steps are very powerful. And oftentimes these other agencies, if they determine that there also was criminal conduct, will reach out to us on their own and report the conduct so that we can make determinations about criminal. But in terms of prevention, these other agencies have services that are available beforehand and can really sort of head off future problems.
So I do think that reaching out to an attorney is pretty important. In Mr. Sullivan's case, which he didn't say in his story, initially the police told him to try to 302 the abuser. So that, unfortunately, even though she did have some mental health issues, that wasn't effective. So that sort of, there was time in between because he followed the police's suggestion about the 302 instead of going and trying to file a PFA. In terms of the procedure itself, going to court, either virtually or in person, is very difficult for senior clients for various reasons. So health issues, other issues. So having knowledge and having someone to be with you is really important. Are you required to have a lawyer for your PFA case? No, but it's very helpful. So as an attorney, my attorneys make sure that the senior is fully aware of what to expect, because seeing your abuser is also very difficult. There's so many family dynamics there. The other issue is, in Mr. Sullivan's case, he initially didn't say to the court that there was an intimate relationship, so he was also turned away in that frame. Yeah, we also see seniors who are abused by people who are not family members, so they're not eligible for a PFA. So figuring out what other options are available is really important, and trying to figure out with local area of aging, PCA, about safety options, because if your abuser is your tenant or abuser is someone unrelated and is in your house, you can file an ejectment or an eviction, but those types of procedures take a long time to get through the court system, often months. And so we have to think about their needs in between that time.
Leah, would you just clarify, there's a question in the chat that when there is not physical danger, but there's possible abuse suspected, who should be contacted first? Who should the first outreach be to?
Obviously, if there's physical abuse or neglect, you should contact the police and then contact the AAA. If there's physical abuse and the senior can report that and the senior can get a PFA, then that was really the first thing. Calling the police, like Mark had said, and then trying to file a protection order.
But if there is no physical abuse.
Right, so if there's no physical abuse, it's important actually to call your local AAA or PCA, which is the Philadelphia Corporation of Aging, to see what kind of services they can get, and they would usually refer the senior to a senior law center or another legal aid organization.
Very well. All right, thank you. Why don't we move on to the next video of victim Peggy Oliverio, if we can show that, and then we'll have discussion regarding that as well.
It was Thanksgiving morning, and I had woke up about 5 o'clock, and I come downstairs, and I looked to my left, and I could see this guy standing in my basement door looking at me. And I walked over to the door, which I couldn't believe I did, and finished opening it, and I said, "There's the front door, get out." But he just kept running back and forth downstairs, looking in every little corner, trying to find my purse. But I was making some auction baskets, and they were covering my purse up at first, and he missed it. Well, after that, he went toward the kitchen, and I found that a chance to grab our phone. And I dialed the 911, and by this time he came back to the hall, and he knocked the phone out of my hand and kind of hit my glasses, which, thank God, that's all that happened. But then he kept looking around, and I then turned and opened the front door and told him to get out. There's the front door. And he left, and I thought, oh, that's good, he's out of here. And I slammed the door, and I called 911. But it was like 2 hours later before I realized that he had grabbed my purse and all that and was gone with it. And it just, was a scary thing that morning. Well, he evidently threw the purse away, but he took the gift cards out of it, and then he gave my credit cards to a lady, and that lady in return gave them to another lady. And they started to use them within a half hour. They had charged about $1,500. Well, then of course I got them all stopped, and the police were looking all over for them. He had a Steelers shirt on, and they were kind of going everywhere. So at first, when I see a Steelers shirt, I would just shake. And it just brings back a lot, even to this day. Certain things will trigger it. And I had a new purse that my daughter had given me. And she had bought me a new one, blue, my favorite color, for Christmas. And she gave it to me then because she knew that the purse was gone. I needed it, but every time I looked at it, I'd get upset. And Christmas, the Sunday before Christmas, we were in church, and she turned around, looked at me, and says, "Mom, are you okay?" And I said, "No, Tammy, I am not okay. I just can't deal with it." And I'm usually the strong one in the family, you know. And we did. Then we had to put in a secure system, security, because I couldn't sleep for the first 3 or 4 nights. I was up. I'd come downstairs, every little noise, and but you know, now we have to pay the money. And we've lived in the same house for 58 years, so it was very hard having that happen. You just think, this is never going to happen to me. You know, you have to be more alert today and try to prevent things like that the best you could. The place isn't, the neighborhood isn't like it was when we moved in here in 1963. To watch out for others, be alert, and come forward when these things happen. If you see something, do something. It was an experience that I hope that nobody else has to go through. But if they do, that there's no more damage than what we had.
All right, thank you. So why don't we turn to Leah, then Denise and Mark for your reaction or response in terms of how this victim could have been helped.
So again, we're thankful for Peggy for sharing her story. As I said, our team deals with financial exploitation issues all the time. We hear multiple stories similar to Peggy's, and identity theft, unfortunately, is very common. I think one statistic I read is that identity theft is happening every 2 seconds. Scammers are getting more and more sophisticated, and they're preying on older adults because they have usually some stable income coming in. So like Peggy, reporting the crime to the police is really important, you know, especially if you're a victim of financial exploitation. You may be eligible for some victims' compensation through the Victims' Compensation Assistance Program, but you have to report usually to the police or to other authorities within 72 hours or have good cause going on. So unlike Peggy's story, what we're seeing often is financial exploitation by family members, friends, or caregivers. So people that you trust are taking advantage of you. So, you know, again, as we said, taking care of yourself is really important, right? Never give out your personal information. Make sure you're looking at your credit card statements and your bank statements. You can now get a free credit report weekly by going to annualcreditreport.com, and they extended that to free to August 20, 2022. If you have an agent or a power attorney, you're concerned that they're abusing their power, you can ask for an accounting of how they're using your funds. Don't sign anything that you don't understand, that you're unable to read because English is not your primary language, or if someone only gives you part of a document. So it's very important never to sign something you don't understand. And again, if you're not sure if something is scam, reach out to someone. Reach out to the AAA, reach out to the Attorney General's office, reach out to the Senior Law Center or other legal provider to ask, whether or not, something is a scam. If someone's asking for immediate payment, if they're asking for gift cards or wire transfers, usually that's a sign of what's a scam, right? So in addition to direct representation in our 4 counties, we also have a statewide helpline. So if you're unsure something's a scam, anyone from any county in Pennsylvania can call the Senior Law Center and get some information. Thank you.
Right. Denise?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo what Leah just said. I mean, I just want everyone to know that there really is a safety net in Pennsylvania. We're very lucky in that way. So there's really no wrong door to reporting. We would do many of the same things that Leah just mentioned. For example, if the Area Agency on Aging was contacted in a case like this, we certainly would encourage the older adult to call police immediately. We would go out and see her face to face, conduct our own investigation that goes on simultaneously with law enforcement, and put in services if necessary to decrease or eliminate the risk. Again, we always act to ensure the immediate safety of the older adult. Our service plan in this case would likely include, of course, calling the police, working with local victim service providers to recoup some of the money that she had to put out as a result of being a victim. We could offer her assistance, again, legal services. And again, I would encourage her to get counseling because it sounds like a very scary and traumatic event that she went through. Sounds like she's experiencing some negative impact on that as she moves forward. So I certainly would encourage her to accept a service plan that includes counseling services. Thank you.
All right. Mark, what would you like to add?
Sure. So, thank you to Peggy, obviously, for sharing her story. And this is obviously a situation where you're in an emergency and you want to call 911 and get help immediately, initially. And then this really goes back to, like Peggy said, you have to come forward and report it, or people don't know stuff's going on. And really, what can you do? You can be a good witness. And when I say that, what I really mean is just keeping documents and receipts and things for damage that are caused, taking photographs of damage, providing that information to the investigators after you report the incident, whether you report to the police or to the Area Agency on Aging, or you go through the Senior Law Center. Obviously, people want that information to be able to better help you. And then also go to court and cooperate with the process. The truth is that with all of our resources, we can't do anything without your assistance. And I understand that can be very difficult from times, and there are resources. Sometimes some victim service agencies provide court accompaniment, where they will actually come to court and accompany an older adult so that they are not as scared of the process. They can explain what's going on and sort of work as a liaison between the prosecutor or the police and the witness. The other thing I think people can do is persevere. From the criminal standpoint, the process is excruciatingly slow sometimes. And so, it can be slow and frustrating. That's half by design and half just, the realities of the world. But, a lot of times an offender counts on somebody losing interest, a victim or an older adult who has trouble getting to court. Contact the prosecutor or the victim service agency and ask for help if you need that. And we can provide assistance getting you to court. Another aspect of this is restitution and the victim compensation fund. So there are ways for you to get reimbursed for the harm you suffer as a result of criminal activity. In this case, Peggy could certainly get compensation for any money that she lost, and might even be able to recover the cost of that alarm system that they decided they needed to put in order to feel safe. And there's two ways. Restitution comes from the actual court proceedings, but there's also a victim compensation fund that doesn't require that you wait to find out how the case comes out, and it's not contingent on how the case comes out. And there are some funds available for some actual costs that come as a result of crime. Just remember, as Leah pointed out, there are some very narrow timelines to reporting those incidents in order to be eligible for those services. And finally, there's two other things that Victim Services provides. One is counseling, which is often available through victim service agencies, but also release notifications. So if you're concerned about an offender getting out, a lot of times a victim service agency can set you up with notification, and if that person, somebody was bothering you and was arrested, you can get notified if they're released so that you're aware of that, so it doesn't happen behind your back.
So we've covered a lot of topics and subjects this morning, and I kind of wanted to get back a little bit to the basic. How, if I'm not being physically abused, what types of abuse, and how do I recognize that, either as the victim or someone who's sort of looking in? What are some of the signs that people can look out for to help provide assistance?
Sure. Do you want me to start?
Sure.
I can start with that. So one of the things that we do at the Attorney General's office a fair amount of is we look at neglect and abuse of care-dependent adults, meaning people that just need assistance with some aspect of their activities of daily living, whether it's, help with groceries, help with medication, things like that. And, one of the things that we tell people to look for is in those care situations, you have to be, mindful of either an absentee caregiver, somebody who's dependent on help from someone else. If their caregiver is often not around or doesn't appear to be showing up for their care shifts as they're supposed to, that's a good indicator. The other thing you may want to look out for is a caregiver who is sort of hovering and won't leave the care-dependent person alone. Because if you have a family member that, needs assistance with their care, their caregiver should still afford you the privacy to talk to your family member alone and in private. And, and a caregiver that won't give you that privacy, maybe that's an indicator. Another thing you can look for is unexplained injuries or bruising that doesn't have an adequate explanation. Those are big red flags that you might want to consult with the Area Agency on Aging and ask them to look into the well-being of your loved one. Unexplained weight loss is another one, or a lack of mental status, alertness. A real change in that condition on a short period of time might signify that they're not getting the care or attention that they need. And finally, the overall cleanliness. Obviously, somebody who has always bathed regularly and been clean and suddenly is not maintaining that personal hygiene, maybe there's something going on that is a red flag that you may want to look for.
To echo some of the things that Mark is saying in terms of financial exploitation, right? So they have stable income, but they're not paying their bills. There's no food in the house. You start getting collection notices from places or accounts, or you get sued by someone. So there's certainly signs that someone may be exploited.
I'll just go ahead and jump in as well. I just want to share with everyone, in Pennsylvania under protective service law, we are seeing a lot of self-neglect. So you may have an older adult who previously was able to care for themselves, manage their own money, and generally take care of their own needs. However, you start to see a decline in their condition. Again, as Mark mentioned, their hygiene may not be the same. They may not be making it to doctor appointments. They may not be able to manage their own money. So we see a lot of self-neglect, but we also see a lot of caregiver neglect in facility settings where there's unknown injuries of unknown origin, or falls with injuries. Those kinds of things are the kinds of things that we see a lot in protective services. And then, of course, as Leah just mentioned, financial exploitation is on the rise in Pennsylvania and across the country. So changes in someone's banking habits or the inability to pay for things that they normally would easily be able to pay for. Significant changes in legal documents that are sudden or unexplained. So I would look at all of those things as things to report as well.
Very well.
And I would just point out I think there was a comment in the chat about a family member who is sort of being isolated. And that goes kind of back to one of the earlier points I made where it's maybe an extreme example, but intentional isolation of somebody away from the care that they need and their other daily needs, social needs, et cetera, can be a form of neglect when it results in some type of injury to the individual. And again, that kind of thing can be reported. If it's just something you suspect, you may want to call, the older adult protective services versus the police, unless you absolutely know something's going on. But certainly that can be reported to our office. We investigate those things along with older adult protective services, and that is definitely a type of neglect.
So there was another comment in the chat, and I'm not sure who this report was made to, but I will raise it, where there was an instance of financial exploitation, but the victim was too scared to report it, and someone else tried to report it, but was told that the victim had to report that. Anyone want to comment on that?
I'll be glad to take a first stab at that. Under protective service law, anyone can report. So you can report anonymously under voluntary reporting under the Older Adults Protective Service Act. So that's not the situation under protective services.
Very well. So anyone can report.
Yep.
Very well.
I think one of the dynamics that comes up, and there was a comment in the chat, is if the abuser is a family member or someone that you trust or you love, you often aren't going to report or follow through with criminal charges because you don't want to get your loved one in trouble. Oftentimes, the perpetrator will say, oh, I'm going to pay it back. I'm going to give you back what I stole from you. But then that never happens. And so there are all these dynamics, either with physical abuse, financial exploitation, or neglect when it comes with someone that you love.
Very well. All right, so at this point, I am going to, I know you guys have talked about a lot of different resources, and so I'm going to ask that we put the resource slides up. And for the benefit of those who are on the phone, I'm just going to go through fairly quickly and read off some of the numbers for you. These slides will be available after the presentation so that you have this information available to you. So first we have the statewide elder abuse hotline, which is 1-800-490-8505. And that operates 24/7 and it's a toll-free number. Next, we have the Senior Assistance Helpline, which is 1-866-623-2137. And they operate Monday through Friday, 8:30 until 5 p.m. Again, a toll-free number. Next, we have free and reduced cost legal services for elders. That includes the Senior Law Center at 1-877-727-7529 or 215-988-1242. We also have the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Pro Bono Legal Assistant Program. Telephone number is 1-800-932-0311. We have the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, 1-800-322-7527 or 717-236-9486. We also have Community Legal Services of Philadelphia, 215 981-3700 or 215-227-2400. We have the Neighborhood Legal Services, and this is for Allegheny, Beaver, Butler, and Lawrence County residents. That number is 412-255-6700. We have free support services for elders. That's the Pennsylvania Office of Victim Advocate. The telephone number is 1-800-563-6399. We have the Center for Advocacy for the Rights and Interests of the Elderly, known as CARI. Their number is 1-800-356-3606. We have the Pennsylvania Coalition on Domestic Violence. That number is 1-800-799-7233. So these resources are available to you, and this information, these slides will be available after this presentation. I do not see any additional questions in the chat. Are there any final comments that any of our panelists would like to make at this time? Okay. So at this point, I thank all of my esteemed panelists for joining us today. I also thank our AOPC Technology and Communications departments for their assistance in producing this event. I thank the members of the staff of the Office of Elder Justice for their tedious efforts in keeping us focused and staying on top of all of the details. I thank the Virtual Education Committee of the Elder Abuse and Neglect Committee and the entire committee and advisory council for their support for this event. Please join us for our next virtual town hall, which will be held next Wednesday on June 23rd at 10:30 a.m. The focus will be preventing and responding to financial exploitation. As we conclude this program today, a survey will be popping up on your screen. Please help us by responding to the survey so that we can make sure that the next town hall will be responsive to your needs and will help us in planning an appropriate event. Again, I thank all of you for joining us this morning and spending your morning with us. We hope that this was beneficial and that the information that you have received today, you'll be able to use, and most importantly, that you will share it. Thank you again for joining us.